Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Hey, motherfucker, what do you like to do?
Oh, I don't know. Play chess. Screw.
Well, let's play chess.
They give off to Jonathan Taylor. Jump cutting his way close to the goal line. He's in there. Touchdown. I-N-D-Y. Jonathan Taylor.
Wheeler finds Quan from the logo.
Here's Halliburton into the front court. Mishandled it, but gets a shot. Hits it. Hits it.
John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Quick shout out to the Boilers. Thank you last night for saving our Tuesday, because otherwise everything else really did suck. Now, I talked about, this being the night, or tonight being the night for IU, and obviously that was not the night from like the first 5 minutes on. But in Iowa City, a shout out to the Boilers, because they went up there, they overcame. 90-81 was the final, tied at 36 at the half. And Braden Smith, as it is becoming very custom for him to do, is being a dude, and especially in those moments when it's necessary to have yourself a dude. I also love this because he's now, and he's a friend of the show too, but he is now migrating into the realm of you hate him just because he's good and you're sick and tired of hearing about him. That's why you hate him. And for Purdue fans, that has to be incredibly gratifying. 31-6 for Braden Smith last night, and that was going to be no easy get, even without Owen Freeman and the Iowa Hawkeyes being, at least in the Big Ten so far this season, a middling team. It has been a team that's put up numbers. But you start that second half last night, if you were listening to Rob Blackman or watching it on the Peacock, it was Purdue just saying, all right, we're going to stroke some threes here, and you're going to have to track us down. And the Hawkeyes were never able to do it. Braden Smith, if he wasn't already solidified atop the Big Ten, with Player of the Year thoughts and so on and so forth, there's no doubt he's solidified right there. I mean, hell, you keep going in the Big Ten the way that you're going right now, and let's just say, for example, you got some games coming up, obviously, with Michigan State, with Michigan on the road in Ann Arbor in the not-so-distant future, and a lot of this will be the tail of the tape, or will dictate exactly where the Boilermakers are going to end up this season. And I do realize this, and I'm assuming it makes you feel good, does it not, Purdue fans? You are now living in a realm to where if you win the Big Ten, it's, oh, well, great, but now let's see what you do in the tournament. And I've never really looked at winning the Big Ten, even though you want to look at it now, especially as being a little bit watered down because there are so many teams and the schedule is, what do they call it, wonky? I don't know what that means, but I think it's a word that's supposed to be, I don't know, Urban Dictionary-wise, James, is that supposed to be oddballish? Very oddballish, uneven schedule. I think we can get to the cut and dry of that. I know the Boilers have USC coming up on Friday, but the tail of the tape you would expect would be when you get a load of Michigan and Michigan State here in the not-so-distant future. And if you're Braden Smith and you're playing, again, at this level and you're doing a lot of carrying this team, I'm not suggesting at all he's going to be National Player of the Year. But he is going to be in a discussion for it if he continues this path. And the Boilermakers, for example, win the Big Ten, no matter what the rest of the world thinks, well, it's not about winning the Big Ten anymore. It's about what you do in the NCAA tournament. Well, fine. What that is, that's a badge of honor. Boilermaker fans should not look at that and be sad about it and go, well, wait a minute. When did this not become meaningful? Because I straight know it's meaningful for Matt Painter. I know it's meaningful for that team. But now you have placed yourself in the upper echelon with expectations, with or without the National Player of the Year the past 2 years. Like right now, who is National Player of the Year right now? We'll go over that coming up a little bit later on in discussion, but who's National Player of the Year right now? And what would, if, again, Braden Smith continues to have these types of games like he did last night, where might he end up in the conversation? I believe as of right now, maybe 17 points per game. But if the Boilermakers, especially coming off the last 2 years, and really emphasize that coming off of what took place a year ago and having the presence of Zach Edey, and then all of a sudden, you pop in there again in the national level elite, there's going to be some automatic, some built-up conversation to be had right there. And why not? And really, everybody should embrace it. And I know all you people are going to go, I'm not embracing anything for Purdue and whatever. Purdue fans would say the same thing. But Braden Smith should be embraceable to everybody because we talk about this all the time. If you're going to describe the way that somebody plays, and let's just say you have a kid, I want my kid to play this way, or how you describe, you want to see, we got to see somebody to play hard. And oftentimes I hear from people that want to see guys play hard and probably have no idea what it actually means. You're just saying it. But where you can find one of the greatest examples right now, and I mentioned Brooks Barnheiser earlier this week. He is like the epitome of playing hard, and he is right there, obviously, in that category with Braden Smith. Braden Smith's picture may be right next to the phrase playing hard, because that's what he does, and he realized this long ago. That is what he has to do to thrive, to play well, to produce, to perform. And let's just face it, he feels it necessary, as he's told us before, that if you're going to go out there and you're going to jack around, then that's to your detriment. This is a part of your makeup. You can have a lot of dudes out there with all the incredible athletic talent in the world, and then sometimes they don't have that. But, man, when you have a dude like that, I mean, that's easy to see. There's nothing cliche about it whatsoever. But really, I think anybody that's ever watched basketball, that's had kids or grandkids or friends, whatever, kids, relatives that have played the game of basketball, and you talk about playing hard, you got to play hard all the time. You can just say, well, you need to play like Braden Smith, because that's the epitome of playing hard all the time. That dude seemingly, I don't know when's the last time, if ever, I've seen him take the foot off the pedal. And last night was another one of those nights the Boilermaker fans can certainly celebrate. Yeah, 17 points. I don't know what is, to me, more impressive. Somebody brought this up to me. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. It was after that loss on a Tuesday night. The second half was pretty awful, right? And it was brought up to me, Braden Smith, as the point guard, he can't shoot that much. He shoots too much. And I thought at the time he didn't do it enough. Because let's just face it, he's the one dog. Trey Kaufman-Wren is right there and very good at what he does, but the lead dog is Braden Smith. And I don't know if it's the 17 per game. I don't know if it is nearly the 9.5 assists per game, but this guy gets 5 rebounds per. 5 boards. 39% from 3. 45% field goal percentage. And believe me, Rob Blackman and I had this conversation yesterday. If there's one thing this team has to start doing, and it's ironic that we saw it take place last night, if there's one thing they have to start doing, it's knocking down the 3. Now, they were getting by with not doing it at a higher clip, But there's one thing that you have to be more consistent at doing, and they should be able to do, is knock down the three. That's exactly what they did last night. Exactly what they did. In fact, you look all the way around, that was about as impressive of a night from distance as you're going to find. Well, they end up shooting like 48% from three, I think. 53% for the game. It was exactly what Rob had brought up yesterday in the first hour of the show, the voice of the Boilermakers. And then especially in the second half, that's what happened. A little 80s term that we'll use. I think maybe this started with Public Enemy because they had an album that was titled it. But they bum rushed the show last night in the second half. And those are... We can magnify Michigan State. We can magnify Michigan. And obviously the rivalry game with IU. But those games like in Iowa City last night, those are the ones that end up biting you, that are incredibly costly at the tail end of the season. Boilermakers got it done. We've got a lot of conversation regarding that coming up, so sit tight for it, too. Yeah, I know I did mention yesterday, hey, tonight's the night. First time since 1998. We celebrated 1998 in music and all that stuff yesterday. And then IU basically crapped the bed and was done in the first 5 minutes of the game last night. Crapped the bed and was done. Speaking of bum rush the show, that's exactly what Wisconsin did. A 3-point barrage that maybe 45% of the time, 3-point shots that were actually recognized and or contested, maybe not in a close nature, by IU defenders. We talk about this all the time in terms of IU. The worst recognition ever. It takes them and seemingly their staff so much longer to recognize anything compared to anybody else. It is amazing. You know, talk about somebody being ahead of the curve. You talk about being so slowly behind it. And believe me, recognition is something that is important in sports, and especially in basketball. And recognition should easily come in a description of, all right, well, these guys are out 24-4, so yeah, you recognize you're in trouble and the three ball's going down. But recognition has to happen much earlier than that. And, I mean, slow on a closeout, standing around offensively, you just sit around and you wait, and you wait, and you wait for something that rarely, if ever, happens. And I've mentioned this, too. You look at these dudes that IU have, they're talented guys. I think individually there is talent there. But you got to have a great deal of want to. There has to be an injection of want to because of the amount of the lack of success this group has had. Again, both collectively and individually. That seems to me like you have a group of dudes that you have to, the gratification that is created with production for them is what fuels them. And without that, these guys are broke as a joke. You have to have the gratification, which fuels the confidence, which in turn helps gas up your level of want to. And when things aren't going right, there is no team anywhere that more quickly goes away than that group. And that's not at all what it's supposed to be like. And I don't know what this hump is that Mike Woodson's talking about, that you got to, every time there's some sort of hump. And I've saw a lot of people reference that in social media, the hump. In this case, collectively, these guys cannot and will not be able to thrive. That's just it. I think maybe you slot some of these guys in other places with different coaches, Maybe there's a different level of accountability. People talk about accountability all the time. These guys only play well when things are going well. And believe me, I understand this. A lot of us would be built that way. You only have that confidence when things are going well, and otherwise you go away. But I don't know if I have ever seen a group that, on one hand, you have that much talent, because individually speaking, there's talent there. Don't get me wrong. But a group that has that level of talent, that has such a lack of recognition and will so quickly go away. And that's exactly what IU is, and that's who they are right now for real. I mentioned this yesterday, too. Yeah, in terms of Mike Woodson, they could have won by 20 last night. There's zero way he's going to be back next year. None. And I know a lot of you are thinking about Saturday and Dusty May coming to Bloomington. If you're going to ask me, I think that it's going to end up being Chris Beard. Chris Beard had a quote last night after the Ole Miss game, and they just absolutely piled on Kentucky. And he referenced Bob Knight, and I think I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I saw this with Jim Coyle, who has a radio show in Southern Indiana that predominantly is about IU athletics. And he had that clip on X, on social media, and said, if you think it's just a coincidence that Chris Beard referenced Bob Knight and the way that he coached in this particular clip in this interview after the game, or whenever it was during the game, that win they had last night, it was not a coincidence. And I do agree with that. I don't think any way, shape, or form it was a coincidence. It is, hey, because we know this. We know his connection and what he felt about the IU program and Bob Knight, because he stated that in the past. And there are certain things you have to get around with him. But let's just face it, a guy like Chris Beard is perfect for the atmosphere right now that is NIL and transfer portal. Because you need, for the most part, especially IU, if you want to get that, what have I brought up already? The instant gratification. There's the hired gun to do it. You just swoop in like stinking Zorro of basketball on a chandelier, and then all of a sudden you put to good use what you do, and that's find and get players. And they're easier to find and get when you have a noticeable stockpile of finances to do so. Now, that's not to say, for example, Dusty May, I think Dusty's going to have success wherever he goes. But he's at Michigan. I just think if you're IU, I think what you're going to end up getting is a guy like Chris Beard. It seems like that as a coach, and for this moment of what basketball is like collegiately, really what collegiate athletics are all about, he is perfectly built. I don't know about the shelf life, but he is perfectly built to give everybody what they want, including these players. If you don't hustle them all out of here, it's that instant gratification to make everybody feel better. Because it is, oh, woe as me. It is as schlep rock as I've ever seen it. But again, the one thing you don't have to worry about, there is no way, you utilize this term around here all the time, running it back, there is no way they're going to run that back. Zero. If you didn't know that, or didn't recognize that going in, you certainly can recognize that right now. And this is not savable. And what you're doing right now, you are calculating, you're putting together exactly an exit strategy to where you and your legacy former player and current coach can ride off into a sunset. You want to make sure you put as much lipstick on that pig of a situation as you possibly can. You got to make it look better. Be like me in the mirror. I got to make myself look better. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to happen. It's probably not, but we got to make ourselves look better. Got to throw some Guess jeans on it. But it will happen. All right, we'll talk about IU if you want to as well. I mentioned Purdue The Pacers last night, that was another group that you thought very early wasn't going to be able to have it in the second of a back-to-back. And obviously, we'll get to the individual players in just a second. I will say this, and I know you have to go back to your starters in the fourth, as Rick Carlisle did. That's just what you do. Go back to your starters. But, man, I wanted to see another minute of the backups in there because they were having such a high level of success. I did. I'm not just second-guessing for the sake of second-guessing. I was at home wanting to see more of those backups in there because they were getting the job done. Now, I will also tell you this. I thought you could have subbed, because that's exactly what Rick Carlisle was going to do regardless. At the time, you needed Aaron Nesmith in the game. Aaron Nesmith was disrupting. He was knocking down some shots, but he was disruptive on the defensive end. If there was one thing that was still necessary for that team, it was a level of defensive disruption. Because believe me, as talented, as quick, as young, athletic as Portland is, and you saw that last night, they can easily be disrupted. There wasn't a lot going on out there that was not provided by Aaron Nesmith. So, to me, you go back to your starters for the most part, but you had to, at that moment, I thought it was easy to see the disruptor needed to stay engaged in the game. And you can make the argument he'd been out there for a while, and he'd been running it up. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was gassed. He didn't look it. I would have ridden it. I thought last night, because you have a day off and you get the Clippers, and the starters look much worse, look more gassed, certainly, than the bench. I know that you guys are going to laugh about this. James, this is a funny term that is used, right? You ever heard the term ridden hard and put away, right? I thought that's what you should have done last night with the backups. You ride them hard, put them away wet. Seriously.
Put them away wet?
I think that's part, yeah.
I didn't know that part at the end of it was.
It's a term that I wouldn't use in any other capacity on this show. So that is not second-guessing. That's exactly the thought last night. And even if and when you knew this was going to happen, you were going to go back to your starters. Nesmith, I felt, was one dude that needed to be on the floor late. And once the starters got back in late in the fourth, I think they cut it down to 1, and then it immediately went back up to 7 and 8, and then double figures, and it was over. The starters just didn't have it. Halliburton didn't have it. Miles didn't have it. Yeah, those guys, simply put, really across the board. Yeah, Nimard had moments. Siakam had moments. Well, last night was one of those things where you could have been a little bit different on this Western road trip and maybe stayed a little bit longer to those that got you back into it and got you in that situation. And I do realize this. You're thinking, all right, so Halliburton's going to come back, who took, 3 shots last night, scored no points, second time this season. And you guys are worried about Miles in a contract. You guys are worried about Miles in a future contract. You better be worried. You can't have that. Can't happen. 0 points, 3 shots. That cannot happen. And you can tell that, to me, the poker-playing rounders tell of Rick Carlisle. He went after the game last night to, the officiating. And I got news for everybody last night. The officiating went both ways the same way. They allowed absolutely everything. That thing was a rock fight under NBA terms last night. I think sometimes in a long season, especially where you are right now, you can afford to do some things a little bit differently. And if not, predominantly those backups that got you within 1 and got you in a nice position there late in the game, late in the fourth, certainly Aaron Nesmith still needed to be a part of the equation out there. You might sub everybody back in, but I thought Nesmith, again, because of his disruption, especially on the defensive end, needed to stay. So that was at the time. It's funny, too. I thought last night, James, and this is, I think, the telltale sign that the game from a Pacer angle is bad, is the only thing, the most vivid highlight I had was when Quinn Buckner referenced the restricted area as the restraining order last night. Anybody catch that? And by the way, too, I don't often sit here because the announcing part really doesn't matter to me. But the oohs and the ahs over the top of people talking. And then the other thing that has to stop is Quinn will go the complete opposite. Like what he will break down, hey, that's great defense in the final 2 seconds of the shot clock. And then inevitably somebody's going to throw in a three. So the grunting and the that can stop. I'll stay with the restricted area being called the restraining order. I was digging that. I thought that was pretty funny. And really, that was the highlight of the night. But the grunting and the groaning and the interrupting and stuff, that can go away. But I'll take the restraining order restricted area right there. That was the highlight because there wasn't much else last night. That would have been the ultimate, though. That would have been the telltale sign that you got some sort of season on your hands here. If they would have won that game last night in the fashion in which they won that game in Salt Lake City the night before. Maybe if you do some things differently, some decisions are made differently, the circumstances change. Maybe not. But I felt, again, in those moments, that should have been the path. All right, we discussed that at 239-1070. Bowman's going to be here a little bit later on, too. Got a busy show. I'll explain as we move forward for you. Tom's Watch Bar coming up tomorrow downtown off Illinois. Cannot wait to see you there. I think Eric Moore, James, is reaching out to me trying to get Carson Steele on here, so I don't know when that is going to be. So we'll see. Somewhere in New Orleans, Carson Steele.
Sounds good.
I don't think it's going to be today, but I think it's going to be either tomorrow or Friday. I know Tucker Barnhart's going to join us on the way to Arizona coming up tomorrow. So we'll be good. Tom's Watch Bar tomorrow. I hope to see all of you down there. And 2 more games, 4-game Western Road Swing. The Clippers and Luka and the Lakers for the Pacers in the next 2. 239-1070. Email address, jmv1075thefan.com. Inside the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. If you guys are watching right now, this JMV Takeover shirt is an original. If you dig it, especially in the hot pink color, I look like Crockett sitting right here in this T-shirt from Miami Vice. If you dig it, I believe I have a way to make more. Just let me know. Quick break. We'll come back. Stream the app, HD Radio, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Channel is reserved for emergency calls only.
Lady, do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza?
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
There you go. Todd Meyer with the instant re-entry request here on The Fan. The Joy Division, isolation. You know what band Joy Division turned into after their lead singer passed away?
I have no clue.
New Order.
Really?
You know who New Order is?
Not really.
Blue Monday. You know the remake of Blue Monday? What hard rock band did that? Who did Blue Monday? There's a remake of Blue Monday.
I can look that up here in a second.
No?
Not ringing any bells.
Bizarre Love Triangle? Doesn't ring a bell?
No.
Yeah, New Order's just one of those classic new wave bands right there. That clearly has stood the test of time. Thank you very much. Yeah, Doug Wiggin reminds me it's Orgy.
That's what I was just about to ask.
Orgy. I think if I were going to name a band, it would be Orgy.
It's a good
Did
band
Michigan
name.
have a quarterback with the last name of Orgy? Why couldn't I have that? Would you guys listen to a show called The Ride with Orgy? No?
I don't know if they'd let you name it that.
How about the JMV Afternoon Orgy? Would that work?
The promotional materials for that would be fantastic.
Great. Yeah, we're taking the orgy on the road this week. Well, thank you, Doug, for that information. Carpix, top of the hour, right? We'll talk a little Boilermakers. Some guy last night said, you don't talk about the Boilermakers. What? I don't talk about the Boilermakers enough. I just had their play-by-play voice on earlier in the day, you yip-yapper. Times Watch Bar coming up tomorrow. Andy Moore Automotive Group Hotline right now. Morning show. Kevin Bowen, writer extraordinaire on the Fan website as well, joins us now. Hello, Kev.
Hello, John. The orgies on the road. Boy, you imagine what your crowds would look like?
It'd be great, wouldn't it? Hey, we're live with the orgy here today.
You might have a partnership or a weekly, borderline daily appearance at the Garter, potentially, or, some other establishments in town you haven't yet been to.
Yeah, we're taking the orgy is going to be live at Joe's Grill coming up this weekend.
I was thinking more like the adult superstore. Exit,
yeah, we're broadcasting live from the Lion's Den, Kev.
Aisle 4, this is where we're at.
Oh, man, we're in the mop and bucket section of the Lion's Den right now, Kev, broadcasting live where everything's 50% off. Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, samples at your remotes would be a little different than what they are currently.
I know in this case, you and Mark are going to talk to Rick Carlisle in the morning, and that may already be done. I think I saw an X message that you sent out. But did it occur to you last night, like it did to me, where there's some moments of the season where maybe you're a little bit different, certainly with the circumstances of this team and the night before and the second of a back-to-back and how the starters look, to where maybe you go down the stretch just a little bit longer since they got you back into it and close with the bench. And even if you don't go with the entirety of the bench, I thought that Aaron Nesmith was somebody that had earned the right and needed to stay out there. And when he was pulled, I didn't like that moment. And as it turned out, it wasn't a great moment decision-wise.
Yeah, I was curious. Well, I was curious leading into the game, would Nesmith play? Because he's yet to play second night of a back-to-back since coming back. And then I know he was questionable. I think he tweaked the other ankle on Monday night. And, him and McConnell, they were huge in getting you within striking distance there. I thought both of them looked, just gassed, frankly. And then, again, I thought Nesmith, who knows if there was a minutes restriction on him. But, I hate to play, the basketball god game, but, you were fortunate to win Monday. You didn't deserve to win last night. Frankly, you're fortunate to win on Monday. So, when you cut it to 6, Halliburton came back in. I thought to myself, all right, if he can rewrite the script of what has been an ugly night for him, maybe. But, Portland deserved to win that one, honestly.
See, I guess I look at it differently. To me, it's back-to-back games like that where all of a sudden now you're different. because you've won 2 road games in a back-to-back situation that, as you mentioned, and rightly so, you had really no reason to be winning, and you do it. And I think all of a sudden we start thinking about this team in different terms, right? Because you play so bad and you're able to sustain and survive and win. So while you're right, they didn't deserve it, I think oftentimes winning a game that you didn't deserve like that in those circumstances lead to bigger and better things, right?
Yeah, I certainly hear you out. I think it's a reminder of, like, you can't play as badly as they did and get away with it. And Portland has certainly been much better here over the last month. This conversation to me, John, is totally different than had we had it, October's too early, like November 20th. At that point of the season, you had seen so much up and down nature that, alarm bells, I think, would be ringing a little bit louder. The 2025 Pacers, they've earned benefit of the doubt. So, yeah, you're disappointed in the loss. And to your point, part of an 82-night survival is winning ugly at times and all of that. But I think I could sit there today and been like, yeah, it's disappointing. I can't believe I had to stay up and watch all of that, but whatever. But bigger picture, I mean, this team has earned the benefit of the doubt here in 2025 of, whatever that January was, 10-2. And then, certainly you'll be watching Thursday and Saturday, and there's no back-to-back excuses and a little bit more time off. You're going to get the trade deadline, cloud inevitably away from you. You're even going to have the Knicks on Tuesday night. I mean, that's going to be a marquee nationally televised game, kind of those sorts of things. And I think we'll start to get into, again, continued evaluation points for this team.
Kevin Bowen, morning show. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline with me right now. There are a lot of excuses can be made, I'm sure, with the second of a back-to-back, and I don't know how valid they are. I don't know, in fact, how many people want to hear them, but the one that can't be made, and I'm going to be curious to see what Rick Carlisle says about the second game of this season, third, I think, on his career, where Tyrese Halliburton has gone scoreless. That not only, I think, has vibrations in the now of that also should even factor in the longer-term future, considering his contract. Are there still red flags flying around regarding that and how that can happen on only 3 attempts, as it did last night in Portland, second of a back-to-back or not?
Yeah, I think what could be dangerous about that, and I know we did tape with Rick earlier today, and that was a question that was asked to him, and we'll obviously play that coming up tomorrow morning. I thought his comments post-game were interesting in that, he largely just kind of blamed the officiating and, lack of a whistle, I think, on Halliburton. And, if you chalk that up to just, hey, it's more physicality in today's NBA, I mean, theoretically, that's not going anywhere. And if you are one that believes, hey, physicality ramps up in the playoffs, well, that's only going to increase. And, the scouting report intensifies, it gets a little bit more microscope. That obviously is a bit of a blueprint that's put out there with Halliburton. And, the Kamara guy should, get credit for obviously what he's able to do. But still, I think that's where you do have a little bit of worry of, yes, these Halliburton games, we haven't seen as much of them lately, as many of them certainly as we saw October and November during that stretch. But if all of a sudden, this blueprint is out there and you put most of the blame as, hey, I think he was being too physical with my guy, I frankly think there should be more whistles called. Well, if this is just how the game is going to be officiated and Halliburton can't deal with that and still produce, I think that's where you have the concern. So it is still a little bit kind of like the loss itself of, like, the Pacers as a team have earned the benefit of the doubt here over the last month and a half. Halliburton has earned, I think, some benefit of the doubt. And, like, he has played like an all-star in the last month. He didn't deserve to be an all-star because he didn't do it for 3 or 4 months, but he has played better. And this sort of game, albeit beyond ugly, we hadn't seen it in, probably a month or so. I'm trying to think. Maybe the Thunder game was the only one really past month and a half. So, again, I think it's something we watch, and it's a little bit nerve-wracking, I think, if you start to look ahead to April when everything gets a little bit tighter. But, Halliburton has certainly strayed away from these games and really had very little clunkers here over the last month and a half or so.
Pacers, Clippers tomorrow night. Pacers, Luka, and the Lakers coming up on Saturday night. Kevin Bowens on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Let's just say, for example, the Boilermakers roll and end up winning the Big Ten again here. And let's just say the stats stay where they are. Is Braden Smith the player of the year or Trey Kaufman-Renn the player of the year?
I think it's Braden. But, boy, I mean, the fact that Trey Kaufman-Renn has put up the numbers that he has could make a pretty strong case. I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought about it. Like, could both of them earn All-American honors? You know, could whatever. Braden
I think if they
Trey
win the
Kaufman-Renn be third team.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kev. I think if Braden Smith continues down this path, and so does his team, in surprising in post-Zach Edey past 2 years in the fashion in which they do, I think he's going to get some national consideration for that.
Yeah, I mean, nationally, I think to me, he's a first-team All-American. Like, that's where you start. I think Janai Broome, Cooper Flagg, I think those two are still probably, at least nationally right now, you know, above, you know, any sort of Braden entering the conversation. But, again, he's just been exceptional. And I thought Matt described it great post-game last night of, like, you know, it's one thing to rely on him to quarterback it all, get others involved, you know, do a nice job protecting the basketball, whatever, be a double-digit assist guy and still give you a dozen. But for him to have the ability to get you 31 away from home on a night when, again, Kaufman-Renn is battling foul trouble and, you know, lawyers not being, you know, that outright, you know, third scorer for you. I know he hit some shots, but still, and you can score 91. I mean, that's just different. I mean, there's just not many guys, period, especially in college basketball, that can, hey, I need to be the scorer. No, I need to be the distributor, and then have the great just knack for knowing what his team needs. I go back to the first half on Friday. You know, Painter left him in with 2 fouls. A lot of coaches, wouldn't do that. And, you know, Braden Smith, you know, scoring was so big in that first half just to kind of stay within striking distance. I mean, that was, 4 at halftime, and it felt like it should have been 14 at halftime. But, you know, mainly in the pull-up game, you know, he kind of kept you in it. And then I thought facilitated probably a little bit more in the second half. So I say it quite often with him, and last night was one of those. I mean, it was just a Sectional 8 type night. You know, if anybody watched those sectional games when he, you know, helped Westfield win that sectional, I mean, he just put that team on his back. And last night there was that element to it. Obviously, Trey Kaufman-Renn helped big time, but – you know, who gets the final assist to kind of seal it? You know, Braden Smith sets him up for that three-point play. So, to me, it's a first-team All-American type season, no questions asked. You know, Big Ten Player of the Year, I mean, could they share it if they win the title? I mean, I guess that's something I haven't thought of. But I think anytime you talk about those awards, like preseason hype plays into it. And so I think the fact that Braden was preseason Player of the Year is probably going to help him out, you know, in just securing that vote if it is him or his teammate.
All right, quick thought on IU, which I'm sure everybody's going to be thrilled to hear in a second, but I think it's also interesting to see, since losses back-to-back to A&M and Auburn, both top 20 teams out of the SEC, the Boilermakers' really lone bad moment was the second half against Ohio State. So you consider that and think if that Ohio State second half doesn't happen, what else we might be thinking about right now regarding Matt Painter's team. But moving on quickly before I let you go, it wouldn't have mattered if IU would have won by 20 last night. The end of this season's all going to be the same with Mike Woodson, you know, retiring, however they're going to describe it. Who is the best candidate right now for the gig? And is it Chris Beard, like I would suggest and a lot of other people would too?
Yeah, it is probably one of the shady resume. And when I say shady, just, you know, one of them where you start looking them up and the Wikipedia page has got a little bit more, you know, some sort of weird
bad stuff. Yeah.
Bruce Pearl. I mean, hell, as crazy as it sounds, and I know he's getting up there in age, but you want to talk about just a pure basketball coach. I mean, what Rick Pitino has done with St. John's is pretty wild. 3 losses combined 5 points this season, one of those in overtime. So, yeah, I mean, it's probably one of those. And of course, the question will be, you know, do you feel? And I feel this way in today's college basketball. It just seems like that stuff. Either the infractions are no longer the infractions, or B, it just seems like a lot of that stuff just gets swept under the rug. So, you know, administratively, you know, how much are you going to pay attention to that? I think will probably be where you start. I mean, always have heard Pearl, has wanted the IU job more than anything. Is that true? Does he look at Auburn and say, boy, I got a great thing going here? I'm not going to pursue that. I'd be interested to see how that plays out. But certainly it just feels like the NFL coach that, Chuck Pagano in 2017, Doug Peterson last year, you just knew they were going to get fired, and it was just a matter of, whenever the season is going to end.
All right, Kev, I appreciate it more than you know. Tomorrow morning, beginning at 7 a.m., you can catch out the commentary of Kev on the Fan Morning Show. Check that out. And I know it's been an odd week for you, but as always, you're awesome. We appreciate you jumping on here as well, taking a little bit of time out of the day, and we'll continue to move down that path, my good man.
You bet, John. Certainly my best to Andy and Jimmy. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, no doubt. Thanks for rolling with the orgy stuff too, man. That's meaningful.
Yeah, nothing like people hopping in the conversation.
Well, I'm gonna see if I can get it.
So.
I'm gonna try to get us all advertising with the Lions Den here coming up. So trying to
Matt would be thrilled to hear this. So thank you.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks. It's a Bowen right there, the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You think we could take a Lions Den advertisement here?
Why not?
So. Why not?
Can really tie it in with the whole sports arousal thing.
Quick break. We'll come back. Alan Karpick, top of the hour. And who else is in here a little bit later on? Who'd you have?
Zach Osterman.
Oh, Zach Osterman of the Star here. The IU angle. We got Purdue and IU built for you later on in the show. Stay right there. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
listen here. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. Now go away.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, welcome back. Alvin Karpik, Golden Black Illustrated, top of the hour. Like Osterman talks, the IU situation coming up here the 5 o'clock hour, too. Rock me, Amadeus. JMV, I'm not sure what to make of the game last night in Halliburton. The league has figured him out. Getting locked up by Kamara is concerning. Only 3 shot attempts, 0 points. Why even play at all in back-to-backs if that's what you get? I mentioned this. To me, that is so monumentally a bigger issue. And last night when Rick and Kevin brought this up as well, when Rick Carlisle brought up the officiating as to being a reason why, I thought the same whistle happened on both ends. And really, it's a similar whistle as you've seen in the Big Ten. So if that is what not only do you sideswipe it and take it away a little bit, but you take it away altogether. Simply put, Pelk Dog, that cannot happen. And that is incredibly problematic. I know Pacer fans are worried about a lot of things as we approach tomorrow's NBA trade deadline, whether you want to ship somebody out or you want to make sure they don't do any work. But last night, even in a second of a back-to-back, and all the excuses you have for how this team played and how they played individually, that is the thing that is and will and should stick out like a sore thumb. Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Wren, who is the Big Ten Player of the Year, in your opinion, to this point? And might somebody, if the Boilermakers win it Big Ten-wise, get the national level consideration after back-to-back seasons, with Zach Edey being National Player of the Year? Alan Karpik with that and more coming up. Don't go anywhere. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Fall for a banana in the tailpipe.
You're not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe?
It should be more natural, brother. It should flow out like this. Look, man, I ain't falling for no banana in my tailpipe.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, let's face it, last night there was a lot of hoop. Momentarily, we'll bring on the dancing horses. Alan Karpik's going to join us. The only good aspect of last night was what the Boilermakers did on the road at Iowa City. Braden Smith, 31 points, and Purdue really behind what Rob Blackman and I talked about yesterday, and specifically Rob brought up that had to change for the better, that had to be efficient, that had to be productive, and that was the Purdue Boilermaker three-point shooting. Where had it been? And how, without it, if it continued to be on a downslide, how it was going to bite them. And you could tell, tied at the half, going to the second half, and it was a barrage. Actually, it was back and forth for a while. But a barrage of three-point makes, 48% from distance. Braden Smith was outstanding, and the Boilermakers get a huge road win in Iowa City. Next up Friday night versus USC. And joining us to talk about that and more from Golden Black Illustrated, Alan Karpik is with us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. But last night, although Iowa is, not an incredible team by any stretch, even without Owen Freeman, they put up big numbers. Always going to be tough in that environment at Carver Hawkeye. And Purdue did a good job of declawing them with the three-pointers in the second half, especially early on.
Yeah, JMV, I think so, and I think it still speaks to the nasty competitiveness of Braden Smith. I mean, I think it's kind of all starts from him and how, he hits the big shot right before halftime to tie the game. Purdue was sluggish in the first half, the Trey Coffin-Wren foul trouble, all of that. But he just seems to be able to take a team on his shoulders and get everybody else to do what they need to do at the right time. And all of a sudden, for the first time in a while, Purdue starts making threes, and it looks like a different basketball team. But give Fran McCaffrey and Iowa credit, too. They did, I think, pulled it the right way to keep the game close. They were making shots, and they were firing at will. And it got to 3 points with 2 minutes to go, and they had a wide open three. Iowa did, Sanford didn't, and didn't make it, or it could have gotten really dicey down the stretch.
Yeah, and it didn't, and Purdue pulled away. Braden Smith had 31, and as of right now, I think it's around 18 points a game for Trey Kaufman-Wren. Braden's right there at 17, not too far off the pace. Let's just say, for example, they continue down this path, and they win the Big Ten again. Who's your player of the year from those two? Is it Kaufman-Wren or is it Braden?
Boy, if I look at today, it'd be hard to go against Braden Smith. I mean, Trey Coffin-Wren has been phenomenal, and he might have had 40 last night had he stayed. I mean, Iowa did not have an answer with Freeman being out inside. Just the way the game was going, Purdue was getting to him, and he has been terrific. But I would give the slight edge to Smith. I just think the numbers he's put together are truly – they are historic, I should say, with respect to the Big Ten. He's just been unbelievable. But Kaufman-Wren would be a close second. I think they're both first-team All-Big Ten guys, assuming that Purdue continues to be at the very upper echelon of the league, which I think is going to happen. And I think both those guys have a great chance to but I would give the slight nods to Braden Smith.
Hey, Alan, we know that Zach Edey has had ownership of that national award the past 2 years. Let's just say, for example, that all this good stuff that we're talking about and all the sunshine on blowing up all the Boilermaker fans' rear ends comes to fruition at the end of the Big Ten season. Do I think he's going to be the National Player of the Year? Probably not, but how deeply embedded might he be in the conversation if these good things continue to happen since that Toledo game for the most part for the Boilers?
Yeah, I think from Auburn would be hard to
yeah.
There's two or three guys that are and I get your point. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether he's going to be a consensus All-American. I mean, or a first-team All-American, I should say. Purdue would have to continue to be in that top 10 of the country, in my view. And I think they can do that, but they're going to lose some games down the stretch. I just think their schedule's too tough when you got to go to Got to go to Michigan, team you boat raced at home. You got to go to Indiana, and I know Indiana is where it is, but Purdue saw enough of Indiana on Friday night to know that can be dangerous. Obviously, with Michigan State also in Illinois on the road, there's just there's going to be a loss or two in there. But if they can keep it at that number low and stay in the top 10. And everybody's talking about Braden Smith, and at least a lot of people are, and deservedly so. That I don't think he wins National Player of the Year, but and this is funny talk, but if Purdue would get to the Final Four, somehow do that, but they don't vote for that till they vote for that before the Final Four, and I think that's what it would take.
I just think conversationally he would be a part of it because I think you factor in the past 2 years with Zach Edey and then moving on without Zach Edey and then having a same incredibly high level of success. I just think a lot of those things would play into the dialogue, if for nothing else.
I agree, and I think it should because this is a guy that everybody wants to minimize in some way. And then Zach Edey was kind of the same way, and at the complete opposite, a foot and a half taller. But my point is, he's just proven that he does it in and game out, and even his not so good games are usually pretty good. Even the Indiana game, he did not. I didn't think he had his best game on Friday night, but you look at his numbers and they're pretty astounding. Last night he was pretty damn good. There's no question about that. And I don't think it's going to change. I think he's just that kind of player. And in terms of point guards in the history of Purdue basketball, he is at the top of the list. There's hardly any argument from that.
Give me Alan Kropp at Golden Black Illustrated joins us. I want to get to Friday night versus USC because there's an interesting dynamic going there, especially with USC and how they lost last night at Northwestern, and then the 3-game stretch in the immediate future against top 25 teams in the Big Ten. But you brought up something that occurred to me. And the hardcore nature that Braden Smith is, and believe me, he said this before, he's nothing without that. I mean, he's 24/7, 365 at being hardcore on the basketball floor. Give me a former Boilermaker that comes to mind when you think about Braden Smith that has that same level of want to and accomplish every single second that they were on the floor.
Not that long ago, and tragically, it's Caleb Swanigan. And it's crazy, difficult as it is, the way his life ended. And he's going to have the bobblehead here upcoming here in Mackey Arena. But a guy that also just put that unbelievable amount of time into his game. Now, his dad, Roosevelt Barnes, had a lot to do with it, but they were always in the gym. I think he's certainly one of them. There are other examples. Certainly, Rob Hummel coming back from his knee injuries is a guy that also put a ton of time into making his craft. And people say, and I was around in a different role when Glenn Robinson was around, that he was also a guy that just, he was terrifically talented, but the super talent guys get there by extra work. But the thing about Smith, a couple of weeks ago, I think Purdue had last week leading into the Indiana game. They had a day off of practice, and as the story was told, they said Braden wants to come in and work out, puts the chairs out, keeps shooting 100+ shots, and I think the coaching staff said, "Well, Braden, why don't you take the day off?" He goes, "Well, I'll just go to the co-rec then if you don't want me to play in my own facility." And I think they acquiesced and let him go, but I know they did, and that's the kind of guy he is, and he leads by example. He's got an edge to him, but he puts the work in, and that's what makes him truly, at least from a Purdue perspective, second to none.
So Alan Kropp at Golden Black Illustrated. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Yeah, and I know we've talked about before, the insertion of Caleb First into the lineup, starting lineup, the Toledo game after the back-to-back losses to A&M. And Auburn. Do you allow yourself at all to think about, because I brought this up with Kevin Bowen a little bit earlier in the show, if not for that second half floundering against Ohio State at Mackey a couple of weeks ago, what this team would be accomplishing at this point of the season right now? I mean, it's still really good, don't get me wrong, and you just have that minor second half blemish right there in the middle of what has been, let's just face it, an incredible run, considering the circumstances and the new direction for this team this year.
Well, you certainly have had that long streak. And again, the last thing I'll do is minimize anything Purdue's accomplished. There is a narrative out there. Well, you have beaten teams. Most of them you should have beaten, and that's they haven't been an underdog in too many of these games. But it's still hard to do, and we'll find out a little bit more with Michigan and Michigan State on the road, and then, like I said, Indiana, Wisconsin, all bunched together. I think they can put themselves in that conversation. Certainly, the Ohio State game was maybe, I don't know if you shouldn't discount it as a complete aberration. Ohio State made great plays. They hit 3-pointers at the end of the shot clock 4 or 5 times. And Purdue didn't play as well, and that's going to happen, and you're going to lose. You know what? If they do that on Friday night, they could lose at home to USC. So, they're in a very chance. If you take away the last couple of years or the last 3 years when Purdue is ranked number 1 at one point during the season, this team is outside of those 3 teams is right there with any of the other ones, and they could get into that conversation of those 3 teams if they continue to roll at this level. I'm not sure they will, but I think they have a chance to do that. And the other thing, there's been so much narrative, and rightfully so, the SEC and how good the SEC is. But I think the Big Ten from top to bottom, when you have 18 teams, there are really no days off. And there are no teams. I mean, Washington is probably at the lowest of the league. And look at Penn State; they're at the lowest, and they crushed Purdue earlier in the season. So the good thing from a Purdue perspective is that the Boilermakers have gotten better and have improved since that Texas A&M and Auburn problems. They figured some things out. Yes, Caleb Furst has had a lot to do with it, but they've done some other things well that have made them a team that's worthy of a top 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. And who knows, maybe if things really go well, they can do better than that.
He maybe got designs on trying to end up here at some point going through the tournament?
Oh, I think quietly that would be Purdue's goal, wouldn't it be? I mean, you get yourself a 2 or 3 seed, get a chance to get to the Sweet 16 and play at Indianapolis, where anything can happen. And I think now that the shackles are off Purdue mentally, maybe a little bit, having gotten to the Final Four finally, you start to think that way. I mean, look at the team with Carson Edwards in 2019. That team, was what, a 3 or 4 seed. I don't even remember exactly. But my point is they came within a bounce of going to the Final Four. You get hot at the right time, and you have a guy like Carson Edwards or a guy like Braden Smith that can take you there. There are a lot of examples of teams like that that get to the Final Four. And sure, it would be nice from a Purdue perspective. I think that's quietly the goal, is to get into that region where you go to Indianapolis. And yeah, there's been a narrative around Purdue. Well, next year may be really their year, with if assuming Daniel Jacobson is healthy and comes back, and is also in a big assumption is everybody else comes back, which I think has a good chance of happening, but you never know. But I think now that you start to think, well, maybe this year could be at that point. I'll let you know in a few weeks on that, but as everybody else will find out. But this has been a terrific team to watch, and Braden Smith is a transformational, if not generational, player for Purdue at that position, and that is in very, very unique company.
It's Alan Carpet, Golden Black Illustrated. He's kind enough to join us this afternoon on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I do want to get to the stretch upcoming for the Boilers on the hardwood. However, Matt Painter, and we've discussed this before, he's been on the show a bunch, talking about his vision of how he puts together a team. Do you think he ever gets to a point and I know that he's going into the transfer portal to find usage that he deems necessary for his team, but do you think there's ever going to be a point to where he goes in there more than what he is right now, and it's just going to end up being out of necessity because that is the rest of the basketball universe collegially?
Yeah, I think to say that you can say definitively he won't would be silly, because it's just evolving, changing. Things are happening so fast that and guys are going. Purdue has got as good, and it's been well documented, as good a culture as anybody does in college basketball. But and there's going to be somebody that's any one of Purdue's stars this year of the big three. They all have a year left of eligibility. they're still in the marketplace. I would be surprised if any of them left because they love being here, and this is something. But it's the old. You can relate to this too. As the parent speaking here, you get an opportunity that is too good to pass up. I think Matt Painter will always look at the transfer portal if he can find the right fit. He found the ultimate right fit 2 years ago with Lance Jones. He's had others that have fit relatively well. Maybe nobody as well as Jenkins, as Lance Jones. But this is the new world, and I think one thing he seems to be careful about is to say with absolute certainty, this is the way we absolutely are going to do it. He has a way that he wants to do it, and that is to be able to continue to develop good talent from stem to stern. But whether he'll be able to do that throughout, I give him as good a chance as anybody, but I still think that the universe is out there. And there are a lot of other factors, as we all know, that are at play that may impact where kids go and how long kids stay at places.
All right, Alan, speaking of that universe, USC lost on a final shot from Nick Martelli of Northwestern last night. That's a Friday night get-together at Mackey Arena at 7 o'clock. And then back-to-back-to-back, top 25 Michigan, top 25 Wisconsin, top 10 Michigan State right there. Will that stretch, you think, ultimately describe the tale of the tape this season of the Big Ten for the Boilers?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that stretch. I mean, I understand you've got Illinois at the end of the season. You have UCLA, who's now, though they almost tossed that game away last night, hitting the last second shot, but they had it in hand and then didn't. Yeah, I think so. I think that's with the Big Ten because, a month everybody was saying, who's the best team in the Big Ten? It's Illinois. Well, that changed, and yet they're still very dangerous. But just lining those teams up and seeing what you have to see and beating who you have to beat, and two of them, Michigan certainly, they got boat raced by Purdue and West Lafayette. They don't feel good about that. They've only got 2 losses in the Big Ten too, by the way. So they have got sights on big things. It's going to be a big challenge for Purdue. But again, when you start with 2 or 3 guys that you can depend on with Smith, Lawyer, and Kaufman-Wren, I think Purdue's in a good position to compete in all those games. Will they win them all? Probably not. But if they can win 2 or 3 out of 4 or whatever we had mentioned, I think it puts Purdue in a chance to be in the final week and in the driver's seat for the Big Ten championship.
Should they be getting more out of Lawyer at this point?
That's interesting. I don't think so. I think he's played. He didn't have his best game offensively last night. But the thing I like about him is that he lets the game come to him, and he has made. He didn't have the best game against Indiana, but he hit the big shot. He hit a big shot last night too when the chips were down. I think it's tough to have 3 basketballs. Not that they don't share it all well, but Smith and Kaufman-Wren are so much a part of this offense. So is Lawyer when the right situation presents itself. He's still shooting an extremely high clip, and I think his numbers this year show that. And they haven't been quite as good as late, but I think he's been pretty darn steady. And they're going to need. Don't get me wrong, JMV. They're going to need him to be as good as he's been for them to be the team that they need to be down the stretch. But I think he's been pretty darn good this year.
Big-time football turnaround this year, too, in West Lafayette, correct? New direction, big-time turnaround.
You think about that. I just came from the press conference, and Barry Odom's press conference, and likable guy, seems to be a media-friendly guy. We've seen him a couple times. 40 new guys. He had 55 in his first year at UNLV, and 50. I get them mixed up. My point is, and he said today, that's going to be kind of the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And that's just it's the ultimate definition. You can't tell the player without the program, so to speak. And that's going to be getting used to. But he's optimistic about what he got. He says all the right things, and he's likable. I think the trains will run on time at Purdue. He's got a big job ahead of him, and Curt Cignetti didn't make it easier for anybody by the job he did in Bloomington. And I think Purdue fans have to be careful to measure themselves against that. But I think that you're going to have a better football team, and they have a schedule that's difficult. They obviously play Ohio State and Michigan in back-to-back weeks. I try not to put the schedule to memory quite this early in the year, but they have a chance actually from the start to get off to a good start, at least on paper. They obviously play Ball State and Southern Illinois to open before they have USC at home. My point is he could get off on the right foot, and when you have a season like Purdue had last year, anything is better than what they went through last year. And I think that you'll see that out of Barry Odom's team. But God only knows when you have all those new players how you put them all together. But he's up to the task. We'll see if he's up to the task, but he certainly talks like he is.
Alan Karpick, Gold and Black Illustrated on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, updating you on what took place last night on the road in Iowa City and the future, the present, and all the glory right now going to that college basketball program in West Lafayette. Appreciate you, Alan, as always, man. Have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thanks so much for having me on, JMV.
Alan Karpick, Boilermaker fans. Zach Osterman of the Star, IU fans. I think somebody faked out, had a fake account of Zach a little bit earlier today reporting something. Did any IU fans see that? Talk to Zach about that coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. Listen, it's inevitable. But the Bucks with Chris Middleton to the Wizards for Kyle Kuzma, is that part of a bigger plan right here? Or I guess you're going to go Kuzma, Giannis, Lillard with the Bucks moving forward here. I always thought, and I don't know if that's just because of the way that he played against the Pacers when the Bucks were shorthanded last year in the postseason. I always thought you were going to get the most out of him when it mattered the most, and that was in the postseason. So this did surprise me, and I don't know. I've never been a big fan of Kyle Kuzma. Now, he's been in the basketball equivalent of Siberia here recently in Washington. Just a thought on that. Yeah, I did see this. Somebody had mentioned, did you see Greg Doyle mention that he thinks that the Colts should trade Anthony Richardson for Myles Garrett and then trade Miles Turner? I did see some of that stuff. They are going to ride with their rookie quarterback for a third and possibly final season, or 3 in what is going to be a longer term. As much as any of us think we know and we have evidence to show, as much as we are, even if you're not, and some of you think, well, all right, this is going to be the year, now you're really getting serious. Michael Pittman Jr. referenced that on Radio Row in New Orleans yesterday. But that is going to be the path, without a doubt. So the Rams are going to host the first NFL game in Australia in 2026. What the hell time is that going to be played? Is it just a different day altogether? How does that work? James, you ever been to Australia?
I have not, no.
James, you ever been to Austria?
No, I have not.
All right, cool. I'm not. All this talk about having an NFL team in Europe, come on now.
You want to know what time it is in Sydney right now?
What time is it in Sydney?
It is 8:25 a.m., Thursday, February 6th.
I could not even come close to trying to figure out when a game would be scheduled for that.
I don't know how that would work.
Man, they wanted to go overseas. Can you imagine? I will say this. I would like to go to Australia. I know the Colts are going to Berlin coming up in November.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Taylor had mentioned to me, hey, do you want to go? And I said, no, not really. So in November in Berlin, although if they ask again at some point, I may. But I would go to Australia. I'd be down with that.
That'd be a fun trip.
Yeah. So let's just say what month of the year. Does it say what month of the year that's going to be? That game will take place? Now, that announcement came. It's going to be in Melbourne, Australia, and the Rams will be the host. But you're almost about ready to make a transition to a little summertime right there. Because our wintertime is the summertime, right, of Australia?
I think so. I'm not
the Southern
entirely
Hemisphere. Did you not take geography in high school, James?
I mean,
What
I
the
did,
hell?
but I wasn't great at it. That's why I'm working in radio.
The Melbourne Cricket Ground with the Rams in 2026. Making history and expanding as the NFL, their international footprint.
That'd be a brutal flight over, though.
I would go to that. I want to go to Australia sometime.
I would too, but the flight would be rough.
I love Australian bands. Are always been awesome to me. I love Australian bands. I know mostly this is because my heart is in the 80s. So I'm looking at this right now. 2026, the Rams are scheduled to play 9 games at home. Seahawks, Niners, Cardinals, of course, within their division. Cowboys, Giants, Chiefs, Chargers. And their same-place finishers in the NFC North and AFC East divisions. So who's going to go with them? All right, quick break. We'll come back. I got that and a lot more. We'll do some calls at 239-1070. Let's talk a little bit more about Australia. Back in the 80s, there was a moment of about 5 years in which there was nothing bigger than Australia. Everybody was drinking Foster's. Everybody was watching Crocodile Dundee. Everybody was saying, knock this off my shoulder in a battery commercial. It was all about Australia. Seriously.
That when Outback Steakhouse got big?
I think so. Yeah, good point. I think there was a dude named Yahoo Serious that came from Australia that was a really big deal. And it was like a run of about 5 years when Australia was a tremendous deal around here. We were taken by Australia. Don't they have a lot of bugs and snakes and stuff that kill you?
Oh, yeah.
Sweet. Quick break, we'll come back. I always loved where Mick Dundee lived. What was it called? Like Mixland or something like that. That is the case where the sequel, in this case, the second is better than the original.
Crocodile Dundee.
I love Crocodile Dundee, too. It's much better than number 1. And then they go to L.A. at number 3, and that sucks. But no, number 2 is much better than number 1. Quick break. We'll come back. Me and you and Zach Osterman, who I think got faked. It wasn't his response. He just said, hey, that's not me. Because you can tell now, clearly, IU fans, basketball-wise, are very antsy. Zach, top of the hour, me and you all the way until 6. And Tom's Watch Bar tomorrow. We celebrate together off of Illinois downtown. Hope to see you there. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
got a panty on your head. You drive fast, eh?
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Oh, so you guys want more Australia discussion? Yeah, I'm very low level. I can tell you about Air Supply. Not the Australian Air Supply, but the band. I can tell you about Ice House in Excess. The Cult is not Australian.
They are not, no.
No. Who else? Midnight Oil. Tell you about that, right? Any modern day Australian band? AC/DC's Australian, right? I believe. You could go at Google the greatest Australian bands of all time and see if I just named. I mean, obviously, Ice House is not going to be one of them, but if they should.
Men at Work.
Men at Work's excellent. See, there was another part of the celebration of Australia was Down Under by Men at Work from Business as Usual back in 1982, buddy.
Tame Impala. I didn't realize they were Australian.
I don't know who the hell that is.
It's a psychedelic rock type
Psychedelic
band.
rock. Keep thinking about it, my brother. Jim McCann, Southern California, says the Australian craze of the late 80s, early 90s is said to be caused by the Australian soap opera Neighbours and the Crocodile Dundee flicks. James, the first Outback Steakhouse, March 1998.
Really?
Yes. When was the last time you went to Outback?
Probably like a year and a half ago.
I have not been to Outback Steakhouse since 2000. Check that. 1998. No, check that again. 2006.
Do you just remember the specific date
that
I do.
You
went?
I'm very good at that, yeah.
I've noticed.
Well, I've mentioned this. September 21st, 1999 was the last time I was in a movie theater.
Do you remember what movie?
Yeah, it was Star Wars Episode 1, whatever Jar Jar Binks was in.
Phantom Menace.
Yeah, Phantom Menace. And it was because it came out in May of 99, and it was re-racked at a place called the Shiloh Theaters in Avon, which was a very discount theater. And the movie sucked so bad, I said, I'm never going back again. I've not even been to the movies with my kids.
So you just swore off movie theaters
you know
entirely.
What? Movies can just smooch my butt. I'm done with you.
Thanks, George
I'll watch
Lucas.
them at home. But I'm not going to the movie theater. How expensive is it now?
It's kind of pricey. I mean, I also I don't go to the theater that often, so when I do, I like to go to the nice Dolby theater. So the last thing I saw was Dune, the second one, and that was a little pricey, but it was a good time.
I don't want to see anything with these CG graphics or anything like that. CGI graphics.
That's fair.
Not Center Grove graphics, but CGI graphics. I don't want to see it. I just don't. I have not been. September 21st, 1999 was the year. Pacers the loser last night, 112-89 over the Blazers. And obviously, it was a second of a back-to-back for both. However, the Pacers looked like they had played like back-to-back, back-to-back, back-to-back. Their starters, in fact, look like they may have been carrying pianos on their back. And maybe they were in the form of Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner because those guys were being carried around a little bit last night too. And I will give you credit, though. I know a lot of you, because we were communicating late last night, you guys were hanging up because you thought that late in the fourth they were going to get it done as they did a night before in Salt Lake City. However, I thought the turning point, and, Kevin brought up a minutes restriction for Aaron Nesmith. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's the case. I don't think Kev knew if that was the case. But he was, as I described him earlier, a disruptor at the highest level late in that game. He was a fly in the ointment, a monkey in the wrench, as they said in Die Hard. He was problematic, especially on the defensive end for the Blazers. I thought, all right, you're going to go back to your starters, which, by the way, that's when everything absolutely and as an end result unraveled. But I thought, first, I would ride this bench a little bit longer. All right, so you knew Rick Carlisle wasn't going to do that, but I definitely would not have subbed out Aaron Nesmith under those circumstances. Anybody with me on that? He was knocking down the occasional shot, which was hard to come by last night because these guys were broke as a joke. But he was so disruptive defensively last night. There's no way I could have found him some pine time considering where that second unit got them within a point. And you can make the argument McConnell deserved to be out there too. And see, in the past, Rick has found out that the guys that helped get him there off the bench were better suited to close, and he would close, and you had a day in between. And at that moment, it was winnable. And then the starters came back in and just got bum rushed. And it was a bad night all the way around. And let's just face it, you only look at the plus minus when the minus is dreadful or when you have a bad game. Really just, hey, you know what, you're at plus 25. You go, yeah, whatever. Hey, you know what, that guy was plus 25 last night. But you do recognize when you're minus 24. Give you a great example of how bad last night went in the plus minus category for the Pacers. Andrew Nembhard had 17 points, was the leading scorer. Was 6 of 10 from the floor, 5 of 6 from the free throw line, 6 rebounds. He was minus 24. That's how bad it was. I mean, really, yeah, T.J. McConnell. I thought, again, you needed to see. Neesmith only had 5 points, so it's not like he stood out a great deal. But late in the game, if you were watching it, yeah, he definitely was standing out. 112-89 was the final. What is that place called? The Intuit Dome? With the Clippers coming up tomorrow night. So that is up next. That will be the third game of 4 on the road, and then the likelihood is there that you end up seeing Luka in his debut for the Lakers coming up on Saturday, I guess, right? NBA trade deadlines coming up tomorrow. I'm sure we'll talk about that. I think Chad Buchanan, the general manager, is going to join us on Friday. And I can't imagine anything ends up being done. Yeah, and I saw the trade miles, and everybody needs cap space and whatever. Luxury tax. I believe with that move with Kuzma, doesn't Milwaukee go? And I don't even know what this means. That's why I also need Trajan wealth. But they're going into the second apron of the luxury tax. What the hell does that mean? But it sounds daunting. I've said this regarding the Pacers, by whatever means necessary, because you do owe it to the fans. If you have something that you like, and I know last night is not going to view anything as anything special, I get that. But if you like what you have, you like what is growing, you like what you're putting together, make sure you do your best work possible of trying to keep it together. Isn't that not what should be done? Definitely how I look at it right there. The Clippers, by the way, if you're doing the math at home, lost on the road at Toronto on Sunday. They were on a 4-game road trip, I think. Actually 5 it was. They lost Sunday in Toronto and then came back home. And oftentimes when you come back home, you really get worked. And they came back home and got worked by the Lakers. So the Clippers get the Pacers. That's coming up tomorrow night. 10:30 is that tip time, which means that is a 10 o'clock pregame show right here on The Fan. This show is going to be live downtown tomorrow. Cannot wait to see you at Tom's Watch Bar. So we'll hang around long enough to watch that. If you want to watch games, multi-games, man, I'm going to tell you what. It is sensory overload at Tom's Watch Bar tomorrow. Great food, too. Great drinks, great specials. We'll see you there beginning at 3. James says break. I will do so with your calls at 239-1070 on the other side. Zach Osterman of the Star, the latest situation regarding the Hoosiers after last night, and I think we can adequately describe the beginning of that game, the early stages, 24-4, 26-4, as a debacle. At least early on, certainly. Well, we'll talk about that situation and more with Zach coming up after 5. Don't go anywhere. Stream the app, HD Radio, the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
What for?
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Let me tell you what, James. When I was 16 and then 18, that was 86 and 88 with the Dundee, the original and the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great deal, deeply rooted attraction for one Linda Kozlowski. Big time.
You had a lot of attractions.
I did too.
Actresses.
That's
back in the
because
day.
I was all alone all the time. You know, back when, and if you're my age, you went to skating parties. Did you go to skating parties, or was that gone?
We had skating parties back in my
So
day.
we had a ton of skating parties. We would always end up where I am from in southwestern Indiana, Greene County. We'd always end up in Bloomington at Western Skateland. And they would have a live DJ in there, and they would do something called Ladies' Choice Snowball. It could be Dude's Choice Snowball, but oftentimes it was Ladies' Choice Snowball. Do you know what that is?
Not a clue.
So where all the dudes go up in their roller skates, and they stand up against the wall, and the girls roller skate by and take your hand, and you hold hands skating around.
So what happens if no girl rolls by?
Well, I'm very experienced in that category. That's why I'm surprised today, because this was always playing during Ladies' Choice Snowball. I'm surprised today I can stand to listen to Kevin Cronin and REO Speedwagon's I Can't Fight This Feeling or Keep On Loving You, because it seemed like one or two of those songs always played during Ladies' Choice Snowball. And it was just me by my lonesome over there, buddy. Just hanging out all by myself.
A lot of bad memories just hanging out by the wall.
Well, I mean, I was always the guy that was called, I was the friend. What do you think? I really like your friend.
You're the friend. You were in the friend zone.
I was the friend zone. Yeah. So, Ladies' Choice Snowball. Where was I going with it? Linda Kozlowski. I did have a lot, though. Yeah. So, I mean, back then, the office of Craig says, hey, once you come out with me to the Shiloh and Avon, at least when it warms up in the spring, my treat. Come on, man. Because I haven't been to a movie theater since September 21st, 1999. But I remember every single film, the location in which I saw it. I do memory exercises all the time to make sure I never forget any of this, seriously.
You have a hyper-specific memory.
I do have a very vivid memory right here. All right, Carson Steele just sent me a text here. 3 o'clock on Friday. What do you think?
Let's do it.
We do it?
You're down with opening the show right off of it.
Shout out to the head coach of Center Grove, Eric Moore, who's certainly one of the all-time greats. And not only that, as a football coach, is just a great dude and a tremendous friend of mine. Between E. Moore and Jerry Brosmer and the guys down there, love him. So it was Eric Moore that said, hey, Carson, go on JMV. 3 o'clock on Friday is what I want to say for Carson Steele of the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, Zach Osterman coming up on the other side, too. State of the IU basketball program with more of what you really wanted to be sick about watching last night on the Peacock. You may have thrown up in multicolored fashion all over the Peacock last night. That's how bad that was, especially early. IU Hoops conversation, maybe a little Signetti dialogue coming up, too. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Thank you for your support.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, I mentioned this if you were listening during the break. Inside the Lounge via YouTube Live, I asked this. You guys didn't hear it. I'm going, without being ginger, I am going with the Rick Astley 1987 hairdo. Do you get it?
It really is kind of the Rick Astley, isn't it?
I mean, it's noticeable. I mean, he's ginger, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But
both
it's very
got the-
similar, yeah. I think I like the Rick Astley right here. I'm going to go with it.
Not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
See, was it last week or the week before last when Lindsay and Gina pissed me off about my hair? And I said, all right, then I'm going to do something different with it.
I think it was the week before last, but last week was when you debuted the new look with them.
Yes. What do you think?
It's good.
Am I Rick-rolling everybody out there with my hair?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm trying to do. WeGrowHairIndy.com if you guys want to check that out. Yeah, I mentioned Carson Steele, 3 o'clock of the Kansas City Chiefs coming up on Friday. Tucker Barnhart's on the road again, and he is working within the Rangers organization, trying to make that squad. He's on his way out to Arizona, and while on the road, he joins us coming up tomorrow. Tom's Watch Bar is our location downtown coming up tomorrow. Should be a good time. Hey, by the way, Officer Craig, I've never broken the streak. September 21st, 1999. I don't know if I can do it. And believe me, this is as close as I might be with that invitation to the Shiloh and Avon. Just don't know if I can do it. Madison Foster says, got to go to the $5 Tuesdays at the Regal, Noblesville. Well done. All right, Andy Moore, Automotive Group Hotline right now. I don't think he has the Rick Astley, but he is rather ginger, and he is the writer of everything collegiate athletically speaking from the Indianapolis Star for the Indiana Hoosiers. Zach Osterman joins us. You are very ginger, but not Rick Astley like ginger here, right?
Well, we're no strangers to love over here. You don't need to worry about that. You know the rules, and so do I.
I love the fact that you're just breaking down the entirety, the lyrical wizardry of Rick Astley right here. That's wonderful. Is that one of your favorite songs of all time? Is that where we are here?
Possibly. Yeah. I think, every sort of like generation, I think, and I witness this now because college kids love Mr. Brightside, which makes me very uncomfortable because it came out when I was in high school. And then I remember that we all loved 80s music in the 2000s when I was in college. So I think I'm just sort of getting my comeuppance with that. But that was our, whether it was The Outfield, Journey, Bon Jovi, Rick Astley, that was the playlist of choice at certain watering holes in downtown Bloomington in the mid to late 2000s.
Let me tell you a quick story before we get to the State of the IU program to kind of lighten things up just a little bit before we get into that, especially after last night. But so the bucket game, I go down with some of the Dave Smiley bros. Great time going down there. As you know, it was snowy and cold, and I couldn't get up off the stool at the Crazy Horse. The only motivation I had was they say, hey, let's go up here. And I went to Brothers, and I had never felt either A, so old in my life, or B, like an undercover cop than I did at Brothers on the night of the bucket game in Bloomington. Upstairs at Brothers. You ever been upstairs at Brothers? I didn't know if that was the deal either, but they either thought I was somebody's grandfather or an undercover cop. Or maybe I was excise or something. Yeah.
Not in a very, very long time, but I helped coach a little 5 team, and a couple of years ago, the night of the race, there's lots of alums in town, and we're just sort of like, revisiting all our yesterdays, and somehow we wound up at Kilroy's, and I paid $10 to get in, and then I paid $8 for a can of Coors, and I think I stormed out. After, obviously, after paying the necessary respects, but it was very much my get off my lawn moments for this generation. So
yeah,
needless to say, I don't hit those those hot spots anymore.
I was having a hell of a good time. I just didn't realize how square peg and round hole I was upstairs at Brothers until a little bit later. I think everybody thought I was like excise or something up there. Seriously. Which is a very awkward feeling. Zach Osterman of the Stars on the Indy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Speaking of awkward feeling on Saturday, could it be more awkward at what we're going to see with Dusty and Michigan at Assembly Hall in Bloomington, considering all the circumstances surrounding the IU basketball program?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any real way to avoid it, frankly. And, obviously nobody's going to try and play it up. And, of course, it would be a good time for Indiana to snap this losing streak, I think it's fair to say. But, I don't think anybody who, has any context for the way this season's gone, for obviously the way things are going for Dusty May at Michigan this season, et cetera, is looking at Saturday and is under any illusions about, how strange that atmosphere might get at a certain point.
Yeah, there's no way to navigate it. I mean, I guess what you have to hope for is that IU plays well, which I wouldn't hold my breath, but that's really the only way that would even come close to not being really embarrassing for a lot of people down there, which I think a lot of people are prepped for.
No, I think probably the worst thing you can do if you're Indiana, and I'd say this is someone who tries to obviously stay as objective about all this as possible, is try to tell people how to behave, because,
sure.
It just, the minute you do that, the minute you're almost kind of manifesting it into existence a little bit, I guess. Not that maybe it's not going to find its way there eventually, but like you said, if, the one way to, I guess, avoid it is the way to try and put a lot of this to rest, which is to play well and to win. And, I know that sounds simplistic, but listen, you've seen a lot of IU basketball over the years. I've covered a lot of IU basketball over the years, multiple coaching tenures, different, a Big Ten at 4 different sizes now, I think, in terms of total number of teams. If it was simple enough, I think Indiana would have, kind of drowned out a lot of the noise with winning by now anyway.
Yeah, it's Zach Osterman of the Star covers IU athletics. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I know we live in the moment and we make these proclamations, I guess, as, hey, the all-time worst or the all-time greatest. I'm going to give you an all-time. I have never seen a group that individually has a higher level of talent individually, but collectively have such a lack of basketball awareness and understanding playing together as this group of basketball Hoosiers. It is amazing, their lack of awareness.
And I get a lot of people who sort of blame the portal for that, right? Kind of this idea of they're not connected, they're not together because half the roster is guys out of the portal, and people use the word mercenary a lot. And what I at least sort of gently try to point out is, there's other teams right around them, not least the one they lost to last night, certainly the one they're going to play on Saturday, for whom that's not been a problem. Michigan had to remake a lot of its roster, of course, in the coaching change from Juwan Howard to Dusty May. Illinois basically had to overhaul it completely. I can find you other examples. Maryland's a good one in the Big Ten of a team that, made some tweaks to its roster and is now probably better than people expected, certainly than I expected. The point is, this is just kind of part of the equation it's not just getting talent, and it's not just being able to navigate this sort of balance between, guys that you recruit out of high school, they're there for 3, 4, even, obviously a couple guys on this team 5 years, and guys you pull out of the portal, whether it's for 1 year, whether it's guys that, have multiple years remaining. Of course, we've seen some players in the recent past who've come out of the portal and had success at Indiana for multiple years, like Miller Kopp and so forth. But it's you've just kind of got to figure this out. And I think everything is going to be defined by the context of what happens around it and what happens after it. It's really easy to sort of blame things on hindsight, but sometimes hindsight is necessary. You look at the end of that Maryland game, you look at the end of that Purdue game, and then you kind of look what happens at Wisconsin, and it's hard to deny what you're talking about, just sort of a lack of consistency and a lack of connectedness that makes you feel like, there are 5 players out there operating on the floor as one consistently enough to win basketball games. And again, I know there are people who say, well, that's because so many of these guys, weren't Indiana basketball players a year ago, or they're just here for NIL or whatever. And all I would say is there are plenty of programs in America having success with transfers. There's more to it than simply saying either they've been here long enough to have some skin in the game or they haven't. You've just got to be able to build that. And in the modern age, you've got to be able to do that fairly quickly. And Indiana's not been able to achieve that.
Zach, I just thought last night was another great example of a lack of awareness or understanding until it's too late with even checking three-pointers, whether somebody's hot at shooting or somebody is just a good shooter in general, and that's clearly going to be in your coaching staff. I'm assuming the scouting report, I mean, there's no quickness or ability to get out, even when it's going down as it was going down. It was avalanching on them last night, but more times than not, they were late on a closeout or maybe didn't get out there at all. Just a complete lack of recognition, which is astounding any time of the game, and especially that early when the three-pointers getting pounded upon them as Wisconsin was doing in that building last night.
And there's not really any – I mean, Wisconsin kind of doesn't make any secret of what it does offensively. I mean, if you look at – statistically speaking, it is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. It's one of the highest volume three-point shooting teams in the country. If you want to – Ken Pomeroy's website has the ability to toggle a lot of his stats over to conference-only games. A lot of those numbers, both in terms of three-point accuracy, three-point volume, percentage of points scored behind the three-point line, a lot of those numbers have actually gone up in Big Ten play. So they've actually leaned even further into it in conference play compared to overall. And I know Mike Woodson, after the game in particular, he brought up the bigs that I think I want to say 3 bigs hit threes, and that sort of, it was 6 threes in 6 minutes, basically. Crowell had 1, Winter had 1, and I think they brought another big off the bench that hit the last of the 6. But again, Wisconsin, that is not a secret. That is something everybody knows is part of the calculus of playing Wisconsin. And, I thought Indiana actually, to its credit, offensively seemed to understand the assignment and try to manufacture decent three-point attempts. Now, obviously, they didn't go down, but Indiana at least tried not to be a team that was trading 2s for 3s and hoping that would work. But the problem is that when you are so sort of, again, I guess the word I keep coming back to, and I feel like I've come back to a lot this season, is disconnected. Defensively, guys maybe not communicating well, guys not sharp to closeouts, as you talked about, guys not recognizing, sort of the danger of where their cover is at a given time within the flow of a possession. It really doesn't matter how good the looks you're generating are at the other end of the floor. If you're going to, Wisconsin, it was something like they'd scored on like 8 of their first 10 possessions. If you're going to kind of go through a run like that defensively, unless you are literally dunking the ball every time down the floor on your own, you're going to get buried in a hole real fast. And like you said, it kind of felt like Indiana couldn't kind of snap to attention the way that it needed to, which, hey, sometimes that can happen on the road when the crowd's up or, tense game, or maybe you've battled for a long time, but you're starting to run out of energy. To happen at the beginning of a game is obviously really concerning.
It's Zach Osterman of the Star covers the Hoosiers on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Malik Renew, injured, slow, out of shape, all the above, because he used to go, especially to his left with his left hand, strong, used to go hard. Last night, I'm telling you, he was acting like he was trying not to break an egg as he was going to his left and trying to get to the basket. So what's going on all-encompassing with that right now?
I think it's probably a little bit of everything. Listen, anytime you see a player come back from an injury like what he suffered, and obviously – I think Indiana felt fortunate in kind of the initial sort of aftermath. There was no, like long-term. When I say structural damage, I'm not saying there was none, but it wasn't like a tear. It wasn't a rupture. It wasn't something like that. But anytime you see a player who normally doesn't play and this is just kind of my experience probably with all sports, but certainly with basketball, when you see a player who doesn't normally play with a big, bulky brace on their knee, and they suffer an injury, and they come back, but they still got to wear the brace, that tells you that whether it's physical discomfort, whether it's not being able to move, instinctively the way they normally would, whatever it is, they're still I thought it was interesting last night, and I know people have maybe been critical of Mike Woodson sometimes for being a little bit stubborn with keeping his lineups the way they are longer than he should. I did think it was interesting that at very least Malik Renew did not start the second half, that Woodson just kind of said, we have got to have more mobility. He kept Luke Goody out there as well as Trey Galloway instead of Anthony Leal. But obviously Goody's the more sort of, Malik Renew replacement, if you want to see it that way, in the lineup to start the second half. It seems like Woodson just sort of acknowledged we have got to have more mobility. We've got to have more quickness, more athleticism. I also think in the same way that Saturday may be a game where Indiana really needs a sharper Malik Renew because of all the too big stuff that Michigan does and how creative they get with it with Wolf and Golden. Wisconsin was a game, and again, maybe this is a talking point for the wider game plan, but specific to Renew, Wisconsin felt like a game that was going to be tough to keep two bigs on the floor. And I know Wisconsin plays with guys who are nominally big, at least in terms of their size. But other than Crowell, they are mobile. They are happy playing outside in offensively. They will take threes if you give them to them. It felt like a game that needed to be more of Luke Goody and McKenzie and Mbako at the four. And obviously in the end, that's kind of how it turned out.
Zach Osterman and the Stars on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Have you allowed, and I know it's much easier for me to do, and you mentioned trying to remain as objective as possible in your gig, and I think everybody out there that listening understands that, but have you allowed yourself at all to think further down the road at what the end game is in this situation for this staff as we approach this point of the regular season and toward the end here?
I don't think there's any way to avoid it. I mean, again, we opened this conversation talking about what the atmosphere is going to be like with Dusty May in Bloomington. There's only one reason why that's a talking point. I understand Dusty May is an IU grad, but I've seen IU grads come back to Bloomington. It's not just that, his connection to the program. It's the current state and direction of the program as is. And when I say this, I don't just say it to sound like I'm not sort of picking on the current coach or the current staff, but I say it because I've been around this program a long time now, and because I have genuinely kind of come to believe this, and this is probably not really an original thought, but I think that there are some valid criticisms of the direction of Indiana basketball as it stands in February of 2025. I also think with a program like this one, every coach is going to get a little bit less time because every coach is going to have to carry a little bit more of the weight of the failures of the previous coach and the frustrations that left behind. I grew up in Atlanta. I grew up in the heart of SEC country, and I saw it with Alabama football. And again, I mean, I didn't come from like an Alabama family or anything. If anything, my stepmother went to Auburn, so she'd smack me in the back of the head if she ever thought that I had any allegiance to Alabama. But in this sort of like the post, I was too young for the post Bear Bryant era, but after Gene Stallings, it goes Mike DuBose and then Dennis Franchione and on, and it just felt like every coach got a little bit less time and a little bit less grace because there was more frustration, there was more nervousness, and probably, a more reflexive sort of bend toward apathy, essentially, when things started to go wrong, apathy or anger. And I don't think you can ignore sort of a familiar feeling building around IU basketball right now. Now, that is not me predicting, X will happen at certain time or Y will happen at certain time. I was happy to land in O'Hare today and find that someone had generated a fake tweet of me breaking a coaching firing.
I saw that. Yeah.
That's a new one for me. But, again, you and I have both been, close-up observers of IU basketball for a very long time. The music starts to get familiar after a while, and I think it would be impossible to acknowledge that it feels pretty familiar right now.
And there's going to be zero really easy. As I think most fans would suggest at this point in time, it should be easy. The decision, to me, is easy. The execution of how you do it and how you do it, because you know that IU will want to do this moving forward as respectable and delicately as possible, regardless of the results that we have seen over the Mike Woodson era. And at least from the people I talk to down there, that's how ultimately this is going to be handled. And I do kind of understand it, but I tell you what, Zach, at the same time, you get an IU fan base that not only is angry, but they have so moved on from anger to apathy right now that, to me, it doesn't resemble, even in games in which they hadn't won or eras in which that had been post-night, it doesn't resemble even what we have been through that we may have thought at that point in time, Zach, was bottoming out or the bottom of the barrel. This is completely different all the way around.
No, I think that's fair. And, I said to someone, and there was a lot of sort of discussion of the way the atmosphere got around the Illinois game, which, of course, went very, very badly inside Assembly Hall last month. And I actually said to someone, I may have even written it, I think I did write it, or something to this effect after the game, that part of what was kind of startling about how sort of angry that atmosphere was that it had been tangible how, frankly, lacking an atmosphere the building had been, in terms of both attendance and also fan engagement for basically every home game up to that point. And I know Indiana hadn't really necessarily played a lot of high-profile opponents, and I get that. But I have never really witnessed less just sort of like emotional investment, at least in real time. I'm not going to speak to, how people feel in their heart or how they're acting in their living room or whatever. But, from where I sit in Assembly Hall, I saw less emotional investment from just like the actual sort of game-going fans over that period of time than I had maybe ever seen in this job. Now, the one caveat I put to that is, does it get that way at some point in Archie Miller's tenure? I don't know. That season was obviously played almost entirely behind closed doors, so we can't know if that would have compared or not. But it was striking, and I don't think it's unfair to say it was not lost on people, directly around the program, people within the department, et cetera, just kind of how unusual that was. And again, that was what made the Illinois game, and then to a certain extent because it kind of turned 180 with the Maryland game where the crowd was more into it, more behind the team, more engaged and passionate and fired up than I'd seen it all season. Kind of made it almost like startling in its own right because it had felt for so long like, almost like the blood flow had been cut off. And that is another way in which I think Saturday could be a fascinating and if we're all being fair, a potentially uncomfortable sort of environment.
I don't think there's any way around it on Saturday whatsoever. In closing here, Zach, the net is a weird thing because it seems like IU's been on the rise in the net, and all they've been doing is disappointing and losing. Am I wrong about that? Seems like they've been like, one up and one up. I guess that's just dependent upon who your opponent is. Is that why?
Yeah, I mean, so the net kind of takes into balances a variety of factors: who you played, where you played them. Obviously, your efficiency numbers, which some of Indiana's efficiency numbers have actually stabilized a little bit. I mean, I think they went up one spot in the net last night.
They did.
I would point out that while I understand why anybody would look at that game and say that was really, really ugly for Indiana, in the end, they only lost by 12, on the road in a game that I think Ken Pom had them pegged to lose by 10. So, they didn't actually really sort of outperform in either a positive or a negative direction in the aggregate what they were expected to do. Obviously, in the context of the game, you can look at it and say it's hugely problematic. That's hugely worrying. But I don't think – I think in the same breath, it's fair to say like the Illinois and the Iowa games being outliers, Indiana has at least kind of – played well enough, I think, to stabilize some of its metrics, some of its analytics over the last few weeks. The win at Ohio State, a close loss to Maryland, a close loss to Purdue. Ultimately, at least in the way the computer is going to see it, a bit of a sort of hold-serve loss at Wisconsin. But I say all that. Indiana's still in the mid-60s in the net. Indiana still hasn't beaten anybody who's likely to make the NCAA tournament. And, you know, that we talked about kind of how difficult this stretch was. Well, the flip side to that is Indiana also kind of needed to find some wins in this stretch because these are the teams that can start building. You can start really building these can be sort of cornerstone wins for a tournament resume. And if you lose all these games, even if you lose them well, maybe your analytics don't kind of bottom out the way they did a little bit for Indiana last season, but you still don't have anything to show for it when it comes to Selection Sunday.
Oh, man. People are noting to me the time where things were coming down hard. And was it the Iowa game when Mike Davis didn't make it because he was sick way back when? Yeah. Is there not to say that's going to happen because it won't, but I mean, I'm assuming people are bringing that up to you as well. I just actually was reminded of that just now by an IU fan that had mentioned how uncomfortable the atmosphere would be and once upon a time when it was similarly uncomfortable.
No, that's come up in conversations with a couple of people from ETU. That was my freshman year of college. I had forgotten how strange the end of that season actually was.
Yeah.
I think we all forget everything in the pre-social media era, but just the way, you know, all that played out. And then, you know, Mike Davis announcing he would resign at the end of the season, but coaching out the rest of the season. That was a strange scene. And, you know, if you're Indiana, I think you're hopeful that whether it's because of performance, whether it's because of, well, I think anything at this point, you don't get kind of a repeat of the ugliest parts of whatever might happen. Because listen, either A, you got to stand behind the status quo and try to do your best to make it competitive going forward, or B, if you do make a change, and this is purely hypothetical. I don't want anybody, especially after somebody went to tweet generator or whatever it was on Twitter earlier today. I don't want anybody to take it the wrong way. But you know, either that or you got to go sell this program at some point, and it gets harder to sell the more toxic it gets. And so, I mean, it's not an enviable place for anybody to be.
He's Zach Osterman of the Star. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, getting us up to date. 1 o'clock, I believe, coming up on Saturday. Dusty May in Michigan, down in Bloomington at Assembly Hall. And again, Zach's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Man, I appreciate that on short notice today, but nice turnaround, and appreciate the dialogue regarding IU basketball, and we'll do it again soon, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Zach Osterman of the Star on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. It is end of the year. It's going to be over. Saturday is going to be ugly. The apathy is real, though. The anger has been prevalent, but the apathy is real. Just ask some friends of yours that might be fans of IU basketball how much they may have been motivated to watch that on the Peacock last night or wanting to blank with it whatsoever. It's apathy. Quick break. We shall return. Do not go anywhere. Some calls to close out. Tomorrow's Tom's Watch Bar downtown on Illinois. Carson Steele of the Chiefs and formerly of Center Grove on Friday. Tucker Barnhart on the road to train in Arizona with the Texas Rangers. Tucker joins us on tomorrow's show. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
join his crummy snobatorium, but his whole place sucks. That's right, it sucks.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Ladies' Choice Snowball. Western Skateland. June 1985, James, with REO Speedwagon. There's John over there by himself. Oh, man. This makes me sad right here. I can't fight this feeling. Thanks a lot, James, for that.
I'm always here for you.
Man, just rubbing that in right here. Appreciate you. JMV, there was a Crocodile Dundee 3. I believe it was Crocodile Dundee in L.A. It was kind of like Escape from New York in L.A. There was a third. Or was that the second, Escape from New York? That might have been the second.
That was kind of a thing in the 80s, wasn't it? They have a sequel and the character goes to New York or LA. I mean, they did that with
New York or LA.
Friday the 13th.
I love the original Escape from New York.
I've never actually seen it.
Really?
Yeah.
I really like it because Adrian Barbeau is running around and there's jiggling and bouncing going all over the place. And then she gets offed, and I go, wait a minute. Can you not off somebody else? And get Donald Pleasance, for goodness sake. Don't get Barbeau. Leave her out here. Thank you very much. JMV, last night was absolutely brutal. If you're an IU fan. Now, I thought it was brutal with the Pacers in mind, too, but I think a lot of people expected them to look in a fashion in which they did. I will say this, though. Tyrese Halliburton, you can't have 0 for 3 zeros in the box score. Can't happen. Damon writes this, thanks for the Purdue talk. Their failures were being one-dimensional with Glenn Robinson, Troy Lewis, Ivy, or Edie. Last year, I felt that the demon was exercised. 2025 is entirely new in a team package. If Edie would have stayed, I feel they would have been worse off. I love their identity. Damon talking Boilermakers. JMV, ridden hard and put away wet originates from horses. What? Saying they rode them hard but put them in the barn all wet from sweating. Tyler Freeman checks in. JMV, Matherin seems off. It feels like he doesn't fit with this playing style than the Pacers are wanting to play. He seems like he is like late clock, invent a shot opportunity. It doesn't seem like he is fluid in motion. Know what I mean? And believe me, I think everybody knows by now, you get in a ball screen situation with Benedict Matherin, as they like to say, you ain't getting it back. If you watch, it is a rarity that off a ball screen, the screener that may be open in that situation gets a return pass. JMV, are you going to have some Hey There Delilah re-entry to commemorate the top song the last time the Pacers won in Portland? Hey There Delilah. Now, that was COVID with no fans. Doesn't count. That was 2021 with COVID and no fans, by the way. Yeah. JMV, how about Scott Drew? I think he would be better fit without the baggage Beard has. Beard does have a great deal of baggage that will never cease to exist, and that could end up being a reason why, to me, basketball coaching-wise and what he represents in this world of transfer portal and NIL and hard-ass, hardcore coaching, I think that's the guy for the gig. But, man, there is a ton of luggage that comes along with this, and that may ultimately be any sort of consideration breaker, honestly. Dan Pittman says this, Purdue gets more with less, and IU gets less with more than any program in the country. I don't think there's any doubt. JMV, I think that Braden Smith could become the NBA's next TJ McConnell. From Greg. JMV, no way IU pulls a Colts move like with Ballard and brings back Woodson, right? There is zero way. None. It is going to be as much as you can. Remember that scene in Can't Buy Me Love at the end when Patrick Dempsey rides off with the girl? I can forget her real name. She's no longer with us. Cindy Mancini was her character's name, where they ride off into the sunset on a lawnmower on their snapper. That's how this is going to be portrayed. That's how that they will want it dictated. Now, that's not, that's more of a, hey, celebration, what a great thing, and now you're done, and you're moving on. This is going to be kind of getting the hell out of Dodge without suggesting don't let the doorknob hit you with a good Lord split you. That's how it's going to be. But no, Brett. Brad Reynolds chimes in with this. I think Brad's kind of a horse's ass. See if you gather that from this one line. Give me a break on Turner, a 14-6 guy, gore his car worth $20 million, not total joke. I said it as it was written. Because clearly it was written by a horse's ass.
Sounds like you just went through jaw surgery or something right there.
And, yeah. Here's what I'll bring up to you. And this is what it comes down to right here. If you're more concerned about Miles and his fit and his numbers and what he's going to make with an extension, which they're going to do, than you are about your elite level, highest paid player getting 0 twice this season and 0 of 3 last night, then you are as stupid as you look. Seriously, you are as stupid as you look, and sure as hell as stupid as you sound. And I hope that it gets better, but I'm telling you, you got 2 of those games. He's got 3 in his career, I think, and 2 have happened this year. I think earlier this season against the Knicks, and then last night. And I realize this, you're going to try to play it off as a second of a back-to-back. All these guys were discombobulated. That's why I thought, especially down the stretch, that Rick Carlisle could have utilized what we would consider a bit of a discombobulated plan by riding longer with that bench once they had pulled them within 1. And certainly leaving Neesmith out there, who I thought was tough, especially on the defensive end late. But forget about the Turner and what he's getting paid and what you're going to forget about, because when the cap goes up, it's not going to look bad whatsoever. You're just talking about it right now, and you're just talking out of your rear end. The major concern should be you cannot have a max-out guy go for 0 twice in a year. And hopefully he goes off against the Clippers, but now it's happened twice this year. And yeah, last night there wasn't much in it. Only 3 shots. So, hey, Brad, I'd be more concerned about that. Beard's baggage was dropped. Unfounded accusations don't equal baggage. Robin, while I understand what you're saying right here, and I have suggested he is the best person for the job, while I get what you're saying, I'm just telling you that some will not consider it that way. That's all I'm saying. I think if you're going to hire the next head coach, Chris Beard is the guy. I think he is perfect other than that aspect. But no, don't get me wrong on this. I'm telling you, for basketball and this era of what is necessary, and especially with a quick turnaround, with that instant gratification that everybody's looking for right now, that's it. But to suggest that the other part is not going to be considered, that's inaccurate. If IU stares away from him because of that, they deserve to stay in this vast sea of mediocrity. I don't think there's any doubt. Like Dusty stay in Michigan and this guy come up here and be what this guy has been as a basketball coach. That's exactly what I see, and that's where I would put him right now as far as that gig is concerned. Over Bruce Pearl, over anybody else. But they will consider that, Rob. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Quick break. We'll come back for a final time, get to some calls and more tomorrow's Tom's Watch Bar. Hey, I can't wait to see you down there tomorrow. Join me. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Everybody freeze. Everybody down on the ground.
Well, which is it, young feller? You want ice that freeze or get down on the ground? If I freeze, I can't rightly drop. And if I drop, I'm going to be in motion. You see?
Shut up!
Okay, then.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
The plain white tees as requested from 2007, right, James?
Well, this says 2005.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Have you never heard this song before?
Yeah, I have. I've never liked it. Am I wrong about this? Is this...
I can't say I'm a big fan of this song, but...
Well, there's no way you are.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. This seems like it's really boring.
Yeah. I'd agree.
Am I missing out on the plain white tees out there, everybody? Hey, by the way, if you're a fan of the franchise, fast food franchise out of California called Del Taco, anybody ever been to Del Taco?
I've been to Del Taco.
Del Taco is coming to the state of Indiana, evidently.
Interesting.
I guess around here. I saw that from David Lindquist of the IBJ. Del Taco was on the way. Wow. Del Taco. Hey, tomorrow's show, Tom's Watch Bar. We're downtown. Tucker Barnhart's going to join coming up tomorrow. Mike Chappell coming up tomorrow. And Carson Steele, the Chiefs, and Center Grove coming up on Friday. We got a busy rest of the week. But Tom's Watch Bar tomorrow. Yeah, I know a lot of you are asking, are the girls going to be there? I have not heard from the girls this week, so I don't know if the girls are going to be there or not. That would, of course, be Lindsay Monroe of Channel 13 and the Princess of Ice Cream, Gina Galeros. I do not know if the princess might be gracing us with her presence. Scott Yaney writes this: Matherin is a very talented young player, but I like Neesmith better all around and fits the style better. Might be time to flip Benny while his value was high. I definitely wanted to see Neesmith remain in the game last night. I thought he was important as to why they made that thing tight down the stretch, and then once he went to the bench and once the starters came back out, the thing unraveled in a big old hurry. 239-1070 is the number. Pacers Clippers coming up tomorrow night once again. What is that, a 10:30 tip, 10 o'clock, your pregame coverage right here on The Fan. Late night for our good friend Eddie Garrison, Pat Boylan, and the gang here on the Pacer Radio Network. Fulton has been on hold for a while today. Hello, Fulton. How are you, buddy?
Hello, John. How are you?
Hello, Fulton. I'm outstanding.
Well, we had a game on Sunday.
You did? Did you score 50 points?
We tried to, but we got beat again.
You did. What happened?
Yep. Well, I actually made a basket.
You made a basket, okay.
30 baskets.
You made 30 baskets?
Yep.
So you scored 60 points.
Yep.
Good job, buddy.
And then we've got 3 losers and 1 win, but we got a game on February 24th.
All right, so you're 1-3 so far this season. We got to get that record up there, at least past 500. All right. How many games do you have this weekend?
I think I'm not sure if we have a game soon. I think we have one on February 24th.
We'll tell you what. Did they have to put up new nets? Did you torch the nets, scoring 60 points over the weekend? That's nice, Fulton.
Yeah, it is.
Did you tell everybody you were doing it for the show? I'm doing it for the show.
I told him I did it for the show. So.
My man. All right, Fulton.
You got to come to my game sometime.
Are you? When are you going to be in Bargersville? I thought you said you were going to be in Bargersville.
Well, we played at Cathedral High School.
Oh, well, that's not close to Bargersville, Fulton. Can you get down there near me?
We're trying to. I'll talk to my coaches and see.
You got it. Well, keep me updated, man. You got to get better than 1-3 here, all right? Keep shooting it.
Sounds good, and I'll see you on Saturday.
You got it. Fulton's right there. Now, does Joe want to be called like this? Crazy Joe is at 239-1070. Are you Crazy Joe or Uncle Joe at moving kind of slow at the junction?
It's Crazy Joe DeBola.
Oh, man. Yeah. I got to watch out for you. I got about 15 seconds. Go, Crazy Joe.
Well, I've kiboshed before, and I will kibosh again. The Hoosiers need to make a big splash on this coach coming up, and I'm a little worried about Halliburton. I think, Naismith is a tough cat. Benedict Mather's good. So if I'm I'd be worried about Halliburton and his no-show last night, and he had another game where he's a no-show. All right, John, I'll see you. Where are you going to be with the Queens tomorrow?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to run right here. I'll tell you, Crazy Joe. Tom's Watch Bar. I don't know if the girls will be there, but I will, 3 o'clock, and you better be as well. Tom's Watch Bar tomorrow. We shall see you there. Tucker Barnhart's going to join us, James. Great job today. Thank you all. If you want this JMV Takeover t-shirt, let me know, too.